Good morning. And this morning I want to talk about a problem. And it's a problem that a lot of people don't seem to be talking about, but it is something that has come to my attention recently, specifically in relation to streaming and also all the talk about backwards compatibility, because that's come to the fore a bit more now that Sony are talking about making backwards compatibility available on the PS5, so you'll be able to play PS4 games. So we've already got it with the Xbox, and now we're going to be getting it with PlayStation. And then moving forward into streaming, presumably older games are going to be made available on streaming platforms. So for instance, I would imagine Microsoft will want to make as much of their back catalogue available on their streaming platform as they can. And I would imagine that will be the same with Sony. And we've already seen it with Sony with their PlayStation Now service. They're making some of their older games available. However, we're not seeing all of the back catalogue being made available. And some of that is to do with decisions that they're making about what games are most popular and stuff like that. But there are other reasons as well. And one of the big reasons is licensing. Recently, I bought a game called Blur. I don't know if you guys can remember it. It's a game that was created by the same people who made Project Gotham Racing, if I remember correctly. And it was a game that I didn't buy when it was first released. And as I say, I only just recently picked it up. And I was looking forward to playing it, and I have in fact had a go at it and played it for a short period of time, and I am enjoying it. But it's not available as a backwards compatible title. And I thought, well, that's interesting because it's quite a popular title, along with the Project Gotham Racing games, which were published by Microsoft. So you would think that these games would be made available via backwards compatibility. So I had a look online and I thought, oh, maybe it's coming. And I came across the page you can see here. If you look at the question, it basically asks why is it not available as backwards compatibility, and an Xbox ambassador replies with, I'm sorry to tell you, but it looks like this game will never become backwards compatible. The main reason for this is that the game was delisted from the Xbox marketplace. In fact, it's been delisted from all digital game stores, which means the digital version of this game cannot be purchased on Xbox 360, PS3 or PC. And I actually went and checked Steam, and it is not listed on Steam. And when I went to try and find a copy for PC, you can't get it. So the only way you can currently get this game is if you can pick up a physical copy. You're not going to be able to get hold of it as a digital copy, or if you already own it digitally, then you can still play it. This got me thinking about, other games and what might we not be seeing in the future. There's obviously Project Gotham Racing hasn't appeared on backwards compatibility yet, but there's loads of games, and the important one here is the delisted. If you look, the main reason for this is that the game was delisted from the Xbox Live Marketplace. Now, there's a list online of delisted games, and if you go into this, it's pretty long. Look, this is just the A's and the B's. And we're down to the C's, D's, this is the whole list, so we can scroll through. And if you look, there's a lot here. And I noticed there were some other games that weren't listed as well. We've got Forza Horizon and Forza Horizon 2, which it seems that they've obviously been relisted because we've got them now. Yeah, Forza Horizon 2 has come. I've been playing that. So that's been relisted, because if you look here, some of this says relisted. So this may not be completely up to date, but it does give you an idea of just how many games aren't available. And as I say, some of these may well be available now, but a lot of them aren't. To talk about the game that isn't on here, and there's a few that I thought I can't play backwards compatible that aren't on here. And one of the games is a game called Speedball 2, which is quite an old game. And that was re-released on the Xbox 360. As an uprated title. It kind of had polished graphics, so you could play it with the original graphics or you could play it with uprated graphics. And I've actually used it on some of my videos as sort of background footage. And I've had people saying to me, oh, where can you get the game? What is this game? And I've said it's Speedball 2 by the Bitmap Brothers. And it used to be available on the Commodore 64. It was available on PC. I think it was available on Mega Drive and a lot of different systems. But if you want it with the uprated graphics, you can't get hold of it now unless you already own it. And I own it, so I can play it. But if you go looking for it on the store now, on the 360, you won't find it. So that game is definitely not coming as a backwards compatible game unless somehow Microsoft do a deal. I don't know whether there's some sort of licensing agreement or whatever there, but it looks like that game's not coming. So bad luck. You're not going to get the game with uprated graphics unless they remake it or something for next, future consoles. And this brings up the real issue here, licensing. And it particularly affects racing games. Any racing game that has licensed cars, those licenses go out of date, and then those games have to be removed from stores because there's no longer the licensing to be able to sell those games. And we've seen this with Blur, and there's plenty of other games out there where this has happened. Same with music. Any games that use licensed music could well be that they disappear because you can't get the license in. And I was reading an article in PC Gamer this month. They did a special retro gaming little extra with the magazine. And there's an article in there with GOG Games. And they're talking about how they started. They basically started by selling older games and old PC games. And, a lot of them were old DOS games. And some of those games, the licensing has gone all over the place and it's really hard to find. And they were talking about how difficult it is and how sometimes, even though they can track down who holds the license holder may not want that game to be available for whatever reason. So it's a minefield. So moving forward, as we move into, as we get more backwards compatibility and more streaming, we're going to be in a situation where you're not actually going to have a full back catalogue. And I know the holy grail for us gamers is that, maybe Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo will put out a service and their entire back catalogue will be made available for a particular system or their entire set of systems. But it's just not going to happen. And so we're going to find ourselves in a situation where these games are going to disappear. We're not even going to be able to pick them up as second-hand items, because once we get into streaming, and this is a big if we get to a point where no games are available to purchase anymore, and we have to buy them or we have to get them through a streaming service, through a monthly fee or a yearly fee or however we pay for it, once those games disappear from the service, they're gone. And so we end up in a situation where games going forward, and I've touched on this in other videos before, but I think this is really important and quite scary. Moving forward, if you end up with a situation where a game comes on a streaming service as an exclusive and it is only on that streaming service, imagine, say, Google Stadia has an exclusive racing game, and that exclusive racing game is only available on Stadia and it has licensed cars. Imagine down the line, when that license is gone, when they've lost the license to the cars, that game's gone. Because you were streaming it from a streaming service, you have no other access to that game. It's not like you can go into a second-hand store and buy a physical copy and play it on your machine. The only people who will be able to make those games available would be maybe pirates, and I'm not sure that that's even possible. So those games will literally disappear into the annals of history, and the only way you'll know anything about them is to read about them and watch videos, that kind of thing. You're not going to be able to play them. So that's the possible scenario for the future, and it's a real negative against streaming. And it's something people aren't talking about because they're talking about speeds and all the rest of it. But for me, as somebody who is just as interested in the history of gaming and, the legacy of games and games as an art form, I think this is a really important issue, and it's something that I think needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about. We as gamers need to be thinking about what we want to see from games and whether we are happy to see these games disappear. Because I'm not. I remember years ago, I'm going off subject slightly, but I remember years ago when I did my degree, I did a little bit about Old English history and literature. A lot of the secular poetry that existed was destroyed. It literally does not exist anymore. And so we don't have that historical record of those secular poems, those secular forms of art, because basically the church destroyed them because they were secular and they weren't religious. So the only art forms we've got left from that period, primarily only religious. And obviously the reasons behind this are different, but the outcome's the same. We could end up with a situation where a large number, not the majority, but a large number of games could just disappear into the annals of history to be talked about, but never played. and people will forget about them. And I think that would be a tragedy. So anyway, look, this one's a bit of a kind of left field video. It's talking about something that maybe some gamers aren't really interested in at all. But it's something that has bothered me for a long time now. And I've talked about this off and on in a few videos about how, it's important to keep old games alive and why I think the retro community is really important and why, sometimes downloading ROMs, that kind of thing, is important. I know technically you can say that this is piracy when you do that. But if the companies out there aren't putting these games out, and sometimes if the companies out there can't put these games out, then the only way to keep these games alive is through piracy. And once, as I say, you get into streaming, you can't even do that. So I think it's something to think about. And I know I keep going on about it, but I do think it's important. But anyway, look, as ever, you guys might think I'm just going off on one and talking a load of old rubbish. Let me know what you think in the comments and we'll hash it out down there. And if you want to talk about it in more depth with me, come over to my Discord and we'll discuss it there, and have a look at me on Twitter as well. I go on a bit on there as well. So I'm going to finish up and I'm going to go and grab myself a cup of tea, and I will speak to you in the next one. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't, thumbs down, and all the rest of it. But I'm gone. Bye.